Hi, everybody. It's Brian Mahoney, the CEO of Trenda Research and the president of the 50,000 plus OTT executive community. We're continuing with our OTT executive podcast series. Today, we're joined by Tony Mugavero, who's the CEO of ROW8 and RAD. Welcome, Tony.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Well, great. Can you just give a quick background on yourself and what you're doing now?
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like I'm the CEO of two companies, but actually it's one company. We just brought these two brands together into one. ROW8 is a premium video on demand transactional streaming service for movies, and they get the latest movies that come out of theaters or even when they're in theaters, like Maverick and Avatar, etc. And RAD, I was the founder and CEO of that company. We built that company up initially as a virtual reality streaming company for 360-degree video, and worked with all the major movie studios on kind of VR initiatives, and broadened our scope into supporting traditional video, but still keeping kind of this innovation lens and starting to use what we saw with blockchain and Web3 as using smart contracts primarily as a kind of more efficient way for payouts and legal and transparency. And so, saw the value in smart contracts very early. And I think now all of those things are kind of coming together, but it's really just one company now that has a couple different.
Congrats on that.
brands.
I saw the news. That was just last month. That's always very exciting.
Yeah.
A merger. Is it a real merger of equals? I always say that, but there's usually like, wait a minute, who's the boss? Who's the top dog here?
Yeah. So our team, essentially our management team and our platform and our apps are all coming over, and essentially we're the management of the combined companies. Mm-hmm. They essentially maintained control, and it's largely equals. I mean, 51-49. But they maintain control ultimately because they have studio agreements that say that they have to do that. So of course, it made sense for us to structure it in that way, and we brought some additional capital in from the outside as well. So yeah, it was a exciting deal to put together, and an incredible opportunity for us to take Hollywood movies, the biggest ones in the world, and a platform for innovation and bring those things together.
Okay, very cool. I want to get into that premium transactional VOD. You covered a lot of other terms as well. Before we do that, just quick background on your career. Like what were you doing before this?
I mean, I went to school for computer engineering, so I've always kind of thought about things through a technology lens. But also in college, I had a record label. So, I was writing electronic music, but then going to school for engineering. So it was always, what can I do in my career at the intersection of media and technology? And so, started building live streaming transcoders in like 2005, 2006, and kind of, the early days of online live streaming.
That was early. Wow.
Yeah. And then, started my first real company, not a record label, in like 2009, that was really built to be a developer API for what was happening with the smartphone, and primarily for video streaming. So we had like HR training videos and marketing videos for customers like American Airlines and Pepsi and like that kind of stuff. So largely B2B, but at that point, like you couldn't even make an HLF manifest on an iPhone very easily. It required some chops, right? So, that company, I was trying to raise a little bit of capital, got acquired, and that ended. I ended 100% of the company, so ended up working out, and then ultimately landed at this company that was initially starting as a media incubator called Galvanize. And that turned into like a co-working space and a code school. And that's ultimately what brought me to Denver, which we were talking a little bit about earlier. But
which is really cool, by the way. The Galvanize, you rubbed elbows with some really interesting, innovative brands that are giant companies now, right?
Yeah. I mean, one of the first companies that came into the co-working space in Denver was Uber Denver. So, got to meet Travis Kalanick, and so like that kind of, we had Box in there. Like there's a bunch of great companies that we had in there, and their Denver presence. But that got a little bit about outside of where I liked to be in terms of creating and building things. So passed the torch. Ultimately, that Galvanize got acquired, and so again, I had founders equity in that, and
you have a really bad habit of
but
having your companies acquired, huh? Like, what's that all?
Well, it's like that's the hard part, is like you work all these long hours and never sleep, and then everybody just sees the headline, and it's but yeah, so anyway, that's kind of when me and a couple other guys started working on this VR streaming platform. And I got an Oculus Kickstarter, played around with it one time, and I said, there needs to be a video streaming network for this, because there isn't one. And so we built one, and immediately had all of like the big, like we were working with Fox, Disney, Discovery, Nat Geo, ABC television. Like we were streaming the Oscars in 360 video. Like
what year was this, Tony?
It was like 2014, 2015. Okay. So kind of the modern VR era bump. In parallel, I had been playing around with like Bitcoin since 2012. So, I was a believer in that technology, but that wasn't there yet. VR kind of was taking its time. And so in 2017, 2018, we started playing around with what we could do with smart contracts, and within the same company, within the VR company, basically. Yep. We're telling all the major studios, hey, you need to be looking at Web3 and blockchain. And they were all trying to figure out just a basic streaming strategy, let alone like the blockchain.
You're way ahead of where they were at that point. Right?
Yeah. Every innovation task force will take that meeting with you, and just like you take all of that and be like, this is awesome. All right, talk to you in a few years.
Gotta nod at you like, oh, it's really interesting. You're crazy when you leave the room, right?
Yeah. But then that phone started ringing again in 2021 with people saying, hey, you were actually right about this. And so we really leaned in heavily to that as an organization, as kind of the key differentiator, instead of being entirely about VR, which is very limited, and you need a special device and new content. Web3 can be back catalog, it can be movie posters, it can be TV shows, it can be whatever, and you just use smart contracts to wrap it up and handle payments and royalties and things like that. So we saw a much more scalable opportunity with that, and we're able to use that kind of innovation lens as a differentiator. Okay. And so that's when we got into the conversation with ROW8 and said, hey, you guys have Hollywood movies. We have this very forward-thinking platform that is kind of like the next era of distribution. Like, let's bring those two things together and take it to the next level.
Tell me about NFTV, right? Mm-hmm. Where does that play? I mean, is that what you mean by premium transactional VOD? Define for our audience that maybe not familiar with that. What is that technology? What is the business model? Where is it right now?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, a lot of people have seen NFTs as like JPEGs that are selling for a huge amount of money. And to just
monkeys,
like the general
right? Chimpanzee or gorillas, right?
Yeah. Ape JPEGs. That's it. But what most people see on the outside is that it's like super fluffy. They don't understand the value. And so, the concept of NFTs is, in their minds, doesn't make any sense. But what it really is, and like the underlying aspect of it, is kind of just like boring technical stuff to most people. But from the creator's perspective, it's actually enormously powerful, because you have a smart contract that governs how you get paid as a creator. And if you upload a piece of content and somebody buys that from you, it's a peer-to-peer transaction, and it reconciles immediately. Okay. It's not like you're waiting 6 months to get paid from iTunes or from Netflix or from from anyone, from YouTube. So the smart contract governs the payout, and it allows people to essentially self-publish, own the IP, and get paid immediately.
One of the risks for content is you're a little nervous about your content being stolen, right? Not getting the credit or the payment that you're expecting for that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and it's just like it ends up being an audit nightmare. Like if you look at the Spotify example, you have the artist who then gets their content on a label, their album on a label. The label then works with an aggregator of labels that then works with Spotify, which then Spotify packages that up and sells it to the consumer. And then so the consumer dollar has to jump through so many hoops to get back to the artist. And the artist is just like, could be somebody on their couch. And they're not going to go audit all those companies to make sure they're getting paid the right amount. Right. The labels will audit to make sure they're getting paid, but like a small artist on the label is not going to be chasing down the label on a daily basis saying, I don't believe that I got paid, $100 when I should have gotten paid $1,000. Like, so with a smart contract, all of that goes away. When somebody buys the song, and eventually we'll get into microtransactions, but like when somebody buys a song for $1.29, the artist gets paid $1.29 immediately. The platform might take a small fee, like OpenSea is taking 2.5%. We take anywhere between 2.5% on the video side up to, even 30%. But so if you just look at that example and you look at what it does for creators and consumers and connecting the fans directly to the content creators, and it just removes all the middlemen. It also, from an operational perspective, you need less of a legal department because you're not managing the contract. They're auditable, they're public, they're visible. Anybody can go see them.
Less legal, less finance people.
Less accounting.
So what you're telling me so far is the benefits are, real-time payment, so there's no delay. Savings in auditing, right? So a confidence that you're going to get paid. Sounds a little bit like democratizing transactions for the little guy, right? Out there in terms of getting paid for their content. Tell me a little bit more about is there a marketing aspect to this as well? You think of NFTs, you think of the community, you think of social. Tell me about that a little bit.
Well, there's obviously two sides in the transaction. There's the creator and the consumer, the fan and the artist, right? So, the fan in this scenario, what do they get? It could be right now, what most people have seen is that it's a JPEG. And, but it's now starting to happen with music. It's now happening with video. We built the video platform for this. And what that means is you have all the metadata and the smart contract that governs the payments and who should be getting paid and what the royalty structures are, et cetera. And then the owner of that gets the underlying content, which is great. That's like an entitlement. If you buy a movie on a streaming service, you get the full movie and it shows up in your library and you can go watch it over and over again. They've proven that you own it. It's just in a database and you get that content. And you paid somebody for it and the studios got paid. And so, but it's the same thing. This is just as a smart contract, but it doesn't stop there. Like, smart contracts are so much more powerful because when you have them in your wallet, you can prove that you own that piece of content, which means that from a brand's perspective, like what Paramount did with Maverick, you can buy this. If you saw the movie at the theater, you could prove that you saw the movie. They give you a collectible helmet NFT, and now you can use that helmet NFT to unlock other services inside the Paramount ecosystem because they can provably tell that you own that. And that's not only a content ownership piece, but there's enormous utility that comes out of that.
Maybe merchandising as well.
Merchandising, people are using proof that they own something on chain to get into a private merch store. They're using it to get into events that, you maybe, if you're a token holder of a specific brand or, IP, you get into a private event or VIP that nobody else can get into because you're proving that you own that. It becomes a ticket to an event. It becomes access to a private merch store. It becomes access to private chats on Discords with stars of movies. It becomes your content ownership. It becomes the payout mechanism for everybody. Like,
for everybody too, right? Not just the content or the actors, the crew, like everybody that's part of that sort of transaction of creating that content. Is that right?
Yeah. So you can add an arbitrary number of revenue shares in there and have 15 people get paid out based on their contract and their revenue share, and they all get paid immediately. It's like, and that's what people on the outside don't see. They see ape JPEGs, but when you look at like the actual underlying technology and what it does for creators, studios, artists, and fans and consumers, and it's like makes your data more safe, secure. It has enormous amounts of utility. It's like once you start to unpack all of these things to people, particularly people who don't understand it or are non-believers, they really start to say, okay, wow, this is more powerful than I thought.
Right.
Maybe
and that's why I was asking the question. It's more than just, getting paid quickly or even getting paid at all in a secure way. It's all the sort of other tentacles out there on marketing and social and merchandising and confidence. How about DRM? Does this replace DRM, or does it go hand in hand with DRM? I imagine it has a really important role to say, one, I have access to that content. As you suggested, maybe it starts with going to see Maverick in the theater, and then maybe I have some rights to, watch it at home or whatever it might be. It opens up those possibilities. Do you partner with the DRM companies, or do you potentially replace the DRM companies?
It's a little bit of both.
Okay.
Like we built the system in such a way that, if as soon as you build a DRM component, you put a target on your back. Now all of a sudden, if something leaks, it's on us, right? So the thing about a smart contract is that really it can't hold much data itself. Like it can barely hold a small JPEG, let alone like a 4K movie. So you always have to point to some underlying backend that's hosting and delivering that content.
Okay.
And so to a large degree, people have been putting the underlying content on peer-to-peer networks, which is obviously nerve-wracking to any major studio.
Right.
They just outright won't do it. So like the reckoning that the industry will have to come to grips with is that the movies themselves will still likely have to have some kind of protection mechanism, whether that's driven by a DRM provider or driven by the smart contract, essentially the private keys being the unlock to the content. I hope that's where it goes, where we get to DRM that is baked into the smart contract, and all the DRM does is check your connected wallet. Does this person own this thing? Okay, I'm going to unlock it. I think that's the logical next iteration of DRM. But in the short term, you don't have to. It's not binary. You can.
So you guys are sort of a transactional clearinghouse. You're not hosting all this content, because one of the questions is, I looked at your site and I couldn't believe the number of titles you have. Hollywood, they've embraced this sort of platform. How is it? I mean, maybe it's because you had the conversations years ago and they're calling you back now like, wow, you were quite the visionary, but this is what we want to do. Like how did you overcome those obstacles and those concerns from the establishment, let's call them?
Yeah. I mean, there's different layers of it. The independent studios and kind of Web3 native studios are happy to put their full content and even give away the IP rights to the characters that are in the NFTs, like give those away to the community. And that, I've had multiple conversations with studio executives, and that like breaks their brain. They can't, they're like, wait, we don't own the IP, the community owns the IP. Like, we don't understand what that means. And so that, from the Web3 native side of things, they're very creative about putting as much of the content and ownership in the community's hands. Marketing is another big place where the major studios are leaning in, largely because, they can give away like collectible helmets, or like Ghostbusters did a thing, or like Space Jam did these little collectible cards and that kind of stuff. So you can do collectibles and marketing pretty easily around that IP because it fits into like a consumer product mindset model.
And that's always been around, right? The merchandising side of things. I mean, you have a movie and then you go to Burger King or McDonald's and you get the little plastic figurine or whatever. So we're kind of taking that now to the virtual and the digital worlds, right?
Yeah, 100%. And then I think the grail here is really getting to entitlements and ownership. And so if you buy a movie, then you own it. It's like when you bought a DVD, you owned it. And the studios can verify that you own that because they can check the blockchain and they can do all kinds of things with that knowledge, right? That we already talked about. And what I hope happens is, and I don't know how long this takes, but the Web3 native studios are embracing this, where the major studios will take some time. But on the initial sale, if I buy, this is an example, but like if I bought a collector's edition of Avatar, and there was one of 1,000 of them that were NFTs or minted as a collector's edition on chain. If I watched that movie 100 times and I no longer want to watch it anymore, I should be able to sell that to somebody else, just like if you go to a movie trading company or whatever. And in the old school scenario, if you took a DVD to a resale store and you sold it for $2 or whatever, the original studio didn't get any of it. Right. And you as the original buyer get like pennies on the dollar for it. So in the blockchain scenario, and what we're seeing with the Web3 native studios is that people are reselling content at a profit and the royalties are baked into the smart contract. So
Right.
you could, if from the studio side of things, if I bought the collector's edition of Avatar, I watched it 100 times and I'm like, all right, I'm not watching this anymore. I have this asset though, and I'd love to just put it back out on the market and resell it. The original studio can get paid again
Yeah.
on that resale.
Which most people don't understand. That's a big benefit of NFTs is the original creator, because you might create a work of digital art, and in the past you'd sell it maybe, and then it might take off and become worth millions of dollars, and you never see any of that revenue. But with NFTs and blockchain, you now get a piece of that, downstream revenue, right?
Yeah, and it creates, like, if you think about that in like the collectibles world, where people are collecting things and taking them to trade shows and convention centers and like reselling them, and like I have a rookie card of LeBron James and I'm reselling that, and it gets bought and sold and bought and sold and bought and sold. Like, you would think that like LeBron James should get like a little piece of that every time.
He doesn't need any more money. Come on.
He doesn't need any more. I know. He won the game. But it's that example, right? Like it's how does the original IP owner participate in this market over and over again? And before this technology, they couldn't.
Right.
And now that could restructure how so many deals are done, and ultimately how people are getting paid.
Yeah, and I think of actors too. I mean, you look at Laverne and Shirley and all the reruns and stuff, and you could have taken the Laverne and Shirley case to the next step in terms of transactions, authentication, the blockchain, all of that. So I have another question for you. So my sister's an actress and she has a script. So one of the nervous things about putting a script out there is people stealing your content. And so would somebody like that approach, get their script up on the platform even before the content's created? Like, when do you insert your technology, I guess is the question.
Yeah. I mean, the interesting thing about the blockchain is that you can put any digital asset in it. And so as long as essentially like you're pointing the metadata to the right place of where that content should live. So if somebody wants to put a full script in there and mint it and stamp it on the blockchain and be like, I put this first, I have a digital record of it. And if somebody takes this idea, I have the proof that I did it first. It's right here on the chain. Here's the date. Here's the transaction, right? And even going to the point of if somebody wanted to buy that script, that she could sell it directly through that smart contract and be like, well, you want to buy this from me for $100,000, just buy it from me on chain. Like, and it'll send the money right to me, and like, done.
Do you have to set the smart contract up in advance? Can you amend it down the road? Or like, so the question is, you have to really smart about the smart contract you set up. Is that tied to that digital asset, that NFT and the blockchain forever? Or can you go back after the fact and amend it?
Yeah. I mean, you can make contracts modifiable to some degree. And you can make even, some of the variables in there, like the price and the quantity that can be sold. You can change those numbers dynamically. So, just exposing those functions and making a change to those, it's a little bit more kind of a complicated thing to do. But once you expose that as an interface, then the original content creator, the contract creator, can change those things kind of at will. But the bulk of the contract, the boilerplate, it's kind of like, if you think about it like a traditional old contract on paper, you have 30 pages of nonsense and then one page of these are the revenue shares, these are the territories. So it's really just like 2 or 3 flexors in there, and the rest of it's boilerplate. And that's kind of how a smart contract works. Okay.
So let's talk about the consumer a little bit. So one of the challenges I think consumers face is, ever since video on demand with their cable provider, we've been downloading and paying for titles, in some case buying them. We might have bought the DVD physical form. We might have paid on Amazon Prime for to have unlimited access to that. But it's very fragmented. It's all over the place. And I would love to be able to go back in time and say, I already bought Conan the Barbarian 20 years ago. Why do I have to pay for it again on Amazon Prime? So how can you solve that problem? And how does the industry come together? Because I imagine it would have to be sort of an industry-wide consortium approach to really solve that problem.
Yeah. I mean, I think we saw the centralized and kind of fragile version of that with movies anywhere
Yep.
and ultraviolet. You know, if you buy a DVD, you get a code, you bring that home, you get the digital unlock, and you know, you can prove that you own it because you're the only one that should have that key. Once it's claimed, nobody else can claim it, right? And you know, the problem with that is that it's still a company that owns the right to that content, and they can take it away or go under, or you know, not honor it at any point. Whereas if you put that entry on chain, and instead of movies anywhere being integrated into streaming services and hoping that movies anywhere never goes down or goes out of business, you now have it on a blockchain that's, you know, publicly available, not owned by any company, and it's proof that you purchased it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you can transfer it around to somebody really easily. Like, I don't want this movie anymore, I want to send it to my cousin, even for free. But now that person can go and watch that content because they can provably own it. And I think that's ultimately where we land. It's kind of like a parallel path to the DRM conversation. It's like, can you prove that you own this content? I'll unlock it so you can watch it via smart contract. And then movies anywhere is, I bought this movie, I don't need to rebuy it again on every service. And that's coming whether the studios like it or not. It will have to converge on that. So like I'm getting the sense that they're leaning into it, but you know, it's kind of a generational shift.
Yeah,
So,
you're ready when they want to when they want to come to you, right? Like you get the problem solved. So
exactly.
you know, it's interesting. I'm not a Luddite when it comes to NFTs. I bought my first a few years ago. And you know, one of the challenges is it's out of sight, out of mind. So I might go and check and see, you know, how it's reselling. I have one that's like a digital dartboard. I don't know, it's interesting. And I have one by a famous artist that was a little more expensive. How do you overcome consumer adoption to something that might be like, oh, NFTs, transactional VOD? Whoa, is this something geared towards the more tech savvy, or you know, how do you make this thing mainstream? I guess is the question.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's an initial kind of core audience of, you know, a few 100,000 NFT buyers on a regular basis who deeply care about the model around transaction and ownership and you know, how the whole system is distributed. But then there's so many people, there's billions of people that don't care about that. So, you know, we've seen that as an opportunity to honor this kind of new audience and use that as like an engagement mechanism for us to learn and grow together with that community because they deeply care about it, but also not losing sight of the mass market, because, you know, really what made NBA Top Shot kind of go crazy, you know, if you're familiar with that, but, you know, for the audience sake, NBA Top Shot was basically trading cards on the blockchain. But what made it so accessible is people could use their credit card and pay for things with dollars. And, you know, instead of using your bank account and connecting it up to Coinbase and getting some crypto and then moving it over to a wallet and connecting that wallet to a website, you know, it's like those things are not hard to do. It's just hurdles that the general consumer doesn't want to think about right now. So we are looking at essentially keeping it directly inside the same TVOD model. Somebody comes and pays with, you know, $20 for a movie that just came out of theaters, but they missed it in theaters. They want to watch Maverick at home. They go to ROW8, they put in, they have their credit card information there and they pay for it. We can take those dollars and in the back end, convert that to crypto, and then essentially put that entitlement on chain, like pay for their entitlement going on chain behind the scenes, just like we'd put it into a database, and it becomes like a transparent thing to them. Really what it comes down to, and this is similar to what Top Shot did, is like, do you want to transfer that out of this platform that helped me get it into the chain? And then it's just a matter of like having them make sure that they have an external wallet, they've connected it properly. Depending on the size of the transactions that are happening, you might have to like do some KYC type things just to make sure that people aren't laundering money. But you know, that's less of a risk for a platform like us, but it's easy to build those mechanisms so that people can onboard very easily, and then when they're savvy enough and they're ready to move their content into like a private kind of repository, they can do that very easily.
Yeah, it's similar to, I mean, it's the reason why I bought my NFTs on Nifty Gateway, because I throw my credit card in there. I didn't have to worry about a digital wallet off the bat. Now I can transfer to others if I want to. Sometimes people do that because they get a larger market to resell. So we can geek out about this all day long. We are towards the end of our podcast. It's really interesting. I'm always so fascinated by folks like yourself, Tony, who, look at an opportunity, they build it even before the market's ready for it. Because, if you really believe in it, that's sort of like that's time to, make it more robust. And then eventually the market comes to you. So kudos to everything that you're doing. We do like to, kind of personalize these podcasts and get to know a little bit about the leaders in the industry, maybe some things that people may not know about you, they might find interesting, Tony.
Yeah. Oh man. It depends
a hobby,
on
an interest.
How deep and dark we want to go. No. I mean, I was pretty heavy into the early electronic music scene, and was sneaking into warehouses and just became enamored with it, and then ultimately got borrowed turntables from my dad and I taught myself how to spin records, and then started getting keyboards from other friends and playing around with keyboards, and was in some of the very early digital kind of music production side of things, and never really like learned how to play an instrument like a guitar or anything like that. I went straight to like DJing and electronic music and like beat production and whatnot, and actually put some records out on some global labels
what's your stage name? Let's go look for them.
There's a couple of them. Dat Guy, DATGUY, which is like, and Quad Squad is another one that me and a group of other guys did. And like there's a couple decent ones in there, but there's a lot of it is just like clearly a bunch of kids that didn't know what they were doing, putting music together at the kind of forefront of music, right?
Yeah.
So now EDM is everywhere, and I mean this was like mid late 90s.
Oh, you're way before your time.
I'm dating myself here, but yeah. EDM really started to go crazy kind of right around 2000, early 2000s, really started to kind of become mainstream, and it's like you've either made it as a superstar in music at by the time you're in your 20s, or it just starts to get harder. Not to say it's not possible, it certainly is, but it's so hit driven and star driven and youth driven, and rightly so. Like there's so much energy there. So I really enjoyed that, and I still have turntables in here and keyboards like in this room with me right now, and I still bang around and play around with music with my kids and whatnot. But I'm thankful that social media was not a thing when I was.
Oh my gosh, the evidence my kids would have on me. Oh, can you imagine? Bad haircuts, bad outfits, right?
Yeah, MySpace. We partnered with MySpace on a party in Miami at the Winter Music Conference, and MySpace was so early. It only had like a few million users, and they were just trying to get their name out there, and they sponsored the party, and all our wristbands said MySpace on them, and it was like this golden era of like social media emerging and EDM, and just like it was a lot of fun. But I'm thankful that there's no record of it anywhere.
There's no evidence of it. That's so funny. And do you find like the creative side of you, and obviously you're a technologist, you're a visionary, the creative side, the synergy between those two feeds each other? Like some of the things you've done in your career you probably might not have done if you didn't always have that creative bent to you.
Yeah. I mean, I think they align, and it leads to credibility with a lot of these conversations, like to understand. I mean, I have music on Spotify that I get checked for. They're very small, but when they come in, I laugh about it, because I'm like, okay, like I don't know anything about this. I forgot who even has this record in the first place. Some of the labels are gone entirely, and I'm still getting paid from like the label aggregator. It's weird, but I know what it's like from the creator side and how long digitally in this kind of new world of all digital distribution and marketing and recognition, how hard it is to get paid and track all of that stuff down. And then just like being able to kind of chop it up creatively with people and get them excited about things, just like I'm excited about them. So it's not just nerding out. It's sometimes deals get done at the club at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and like that's in my DNA, so I can hang.
That's very cool. So it kind of keeps you in tune with the consumer and the creator, which is fantastic. So Tony, a recording artist, in addition to technologist, huh? We have to look for you in Spotify.
No, most of the songs are awful, but they're out there. There's proof that that's the only digital proof that I was there.
That's great. Well, Tony, listen, it's been a pleasure. I'll keep an eye out for everything that you're doing at ROW8 and RAD. Very exciting. Congrats again on the merger. Thank you. Let's keep in touch. So everybody, Tony Mugavero, CEO of ROW8 and RAD. Thanks for joining us today.
Awesome. Thank you.
And this is Brian Mahoney with the OTT Executive Podcast signing off. Everybody have a great day.